Good afternoon. It's Seven Institutions. It's Tuesday, May 2nd. We're going to spend some time today with Dean George, Chair of the Vermont Parole Board. It's the Governor's appointment confirmation. Welcome today, Mr. George. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good to see you all.
Just turn that up a little bit. I'm just having a hard time hearing it. So, pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Senator.
We had a great confirmation on Richard Grassi. He was we had a good time with him. He was really good. So it's an honor to have you in here as the chair of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
yes.
I know it says a lot of your extensive history of what you have here, but how long have you been on the parole board? How long have you served?
I started in 2006, I believe. I was appointed by Governor Douglas at the time, not as the chair, but I came on as a board member at a time when there was a lot of controversy going on with the board. I remember talking with Senator Mazza about that back then, and so I came on for about a year and then was appointed the chair about a year and a half later. And it was at that point when we got a consultant from the National Institute of Corrections and developed our official policy and procedures manual based on case law and statutes, which was long overdue, and began the process of having the board become an independent entity and not part of the Department of Corrections, and started moving in the direction of having board members trained to do the work. And so it's been a great process, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed working with the people on the board, and that's one of the reasons I keep doing this. Is it's the challenges are great, but it's also very important work, and the group that I work with are just wonderful people.
I would say you've been on there since 2006. That there must be a little bit of enjoyment there. It's going to be.
It's not for the money.
Yeah. We know you're in state government, so we know it's not for the money. Chair, for sure.
Thank you.
So what keeps you there?
Well, as I was saying, it's important work, and we get to interact with people in the criminal justice system at the point where it's time to try to move them back into the community and try to be successful. We get an opportunity to work with victims of crimes who, quite frankly, in many cases have never had any interaction with people in the criminal justice system, because a lot of times cases are resolved without going to court, and sometimes the victims are kind of left to the side. So we involve our work with victims as much as possible, and that's been a pleasure to do for many of them. It's the first opportunity they've had, and it's great to see them participate and actually be part of the process of reintegrating people back into the community when we can do that. So that's been an important part. Also, the training that we've obtained over the years and the way we've moved from a board that just kind of made decisions based on their gut feelings to one which is evidence-based and looks at programs as a transition for people that need these programs, ways to get them involved in that, providing incentives for them to be successful. And and then we have a variety of different hearings, and one of the ones that we enjoy the most are the early release hearings, where people have done really well on parole supervision and are at a point where they're ready to be discharged from supervision from corrections and the criminal justice system, and we can hold a hearing. And a lot of times they'll bring their family in with them, and it's a really fun process at that point. There are a lot of difficult hearings, challenges. We have them all the time. Sex offenders, domestic violence cases, ones that require a lot of effort to try to move people in the right direction and focus on those kinds of things. But by and large, it's the challenge, but it's important work, and the people that I get to work with, it's great.
Dean, how many do you see a year or a month or up for parole? Is that count change? And the other question would be, how is our success rate of when you parole them come back, or
Right. Well, one thing, Senator Mazza, I'd like to point out is that we're doing less hearings now than we were a couple of years ago, which is a good thing because there are fewer people in the system. One of the things that I like the best about where we're at right now is that we have nearly 2 to 3 times more people on parole than are on furlough. And for the past few years, working with the Council for State Governments, we've been working at trying to change the focus from furlough supervision to parole supervision. And that has begun to show its benefit. So last year, for example, we had 700 hearings. And there's a host of different kinds of hearings. Out of that 700, we had about 150 parole violation hearings. So parole violation hearings are the ones that are sometimes the most challenging because many times we're conducting violation hearings, which are due process hearings for people who have reoffended and have pending criminal charges. So we're kind of working together with the court system at this point. If someone has a new criminal charge and they're charged with violating their conditions of parole, a lot of times we will see where the court's going to go with this case and try to manage their violation hearing at a point when the court part of it has been either resolved or is at a stage when we know we can proceed with our violation hearing without interfering with whatever court process is going to take place. So that has been a huge challenge over the last couple of years because the courts have, because of the pandemic, obviously things slowed down and a lot of their work was backlogged as well. And so we were sitting on people who had committed new offenses, who were still on parole. We tightened up the supervision while we're waiting. And in each month we will review their case and then determine whether the court case has begun to move forward or not. And if it has, can we now conduct our violation hearing and figure out what to do? But a few years ago, when we had violation hearings, we would revoke parole for probably 3/4 of the people that violated their parole. Now we're revoking parole for somewhere between 35 and 40%, a much lower percentage.
Good.
So we're finding creative ways to keep people on parole and out of the facilities as best we can.
Now, the out-of-state folks, they don't come here in person when they have, you do a Zoom or?
Yeah, well, we do all our hearings by teams.
Oh, okay.
Since the pandemic, when we started doing that, we have found that works tremendous for us. In the past, I would have to schedule 3 board members to go to each site, and our flexibility of moving cases around would be sort of fixed because it would be hard to get 3 people for tomorrow's, say, to have to go to Newport and back. And so now we can plug our hearings in. We have hearings scheduled for 9 days a month, 3 days a week. And then we have a staff meeting on the 4th week. And so if we get something that comes in at the last minute, we can plug it in somewhere in our schedule and not have to figure out how we're going to get 3 people traveling to that site for a hearing and then move back again. So that has helped us a lot. It's also provided a tremendous way to get victims more involved in their cases. In the past, it was really hard in understanding victims who want to participate in the case to travel to a correctional facility, go inside the facility and be sitting across the table from the offender in their case. And now they can participate by teams. They can observe the hearing. They can participate by submitting letters or even providing their own testimony. So that gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Remember years ago, they asked to drive to the hearings, snowstorms and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was a half a day for very few cases. Now you can do a lot of cases in the course of a day.
Yes, we can, and we can be there much quicker. And
sure,
quite frankly, driving 3 hours each way several times a month and worrying about the weather, and then a lot of times we'd have to put board members up at a hotel for the night.
Yeah,
we're not only saving money, but we're being more efficient.
Thank you.
So just for the benefit of the rest of the committee, Dean, and I'm not sure you remember, but I've known you, or at least been aware of you, longer than I've known my wife and son combined.
Oh, combined?
50 years I go back with.
Yeah.
Oh my
Do
God.
you remember?
In the Rutland Barracks of the state police, yeah.
Right.
He's only 55.
I know, well.
I know. Well,
So I was a 22-year-old kid that had just started in Rutland radio, and
yeah.
I can't remember Tom's last name, but you two were partners. I want to say
Well,
Fritz or something like that.
Do you remember, Brian, back then, Augie Fernandez worked for
Yes.
TV.
Yeah.
And Augie and I did a radio show at WSYB in the
Yeah.
mid to late 70s.
Yeah,
I came in from the state police, he came in from Rutland PD, and I know you were there. And
yeah, I started in
we
72.
had this call-in talk show well ahead of our time.
Yeah, so I just want to mention that for the benefit of the others here. But you bring a lot of experience in different facets of, you've been in public service in terms of select board in Middlebury. I didn't realize till I read your bio that you were also in the legislature for one term
Yeah.
and probably interacted with the good senator from Grand Isle,
I did.
transportation in the other body. And you had obviously a very long storied career with law enforcement. So I do think you bring a lot of really special aspects of personality. And obviously seeing you again, you have what it takes to pretty well do this job. And I'm glad we have you as a chair.
Well,
And
thank you.
I have no problem you back on. So
Who drives the training for you? Who drives the direction of how probation and parole is gonna go?
Yeah.
Who sets the courses up and say, okay, we think we're gonna try this for a little bit? There must be somebody.
Yeah, there really is. In fact, I'm glad you asked that because we belong to an organization called the Association of Paroling Authorities International. And in fact, we had one board member and our director just returned from the annual conference in Kansas City last week. So they provide a lot of training programs, and every time there's an opportunity, I apply for them. And they've sent instructors to Vermont for various topics for us to take on. And we currently have we got involved in it last year. We were invited by the director to be the next state to participate in what's called Structured Decision-Making Framework. And currently there are 9 states using this framework. We began the process as an invited state to take this on. And we started by doing a couple of observations of states nearby that were using it, using Teams and Zoom. And then last fall, our director, Mary Jane Ainsworth, and myself went to their meeting conference in New York City. And so we've been officially invited and are in the process now of conducting the training. We just finished the readiness portion of that. And this summer and fall, we will be doing the training. And what this will provide is a specific framework of using all the categories that we typically would use in making our decision, but it would be in a framework of a document that can go with the file that would show how the board got to reaching its decision, provide us even more accountability. And we have, I think, a good track record for being accountable for our decisions now, but this will make it even better. And to be invited to participate in this with the 9 other states that are currently doing this is quite a privilege. So we're really looking forward to that. And it's all funded by the National Institute of Corrections through I believe it's the Department of Justice. So it's a great program. So who's driving that? I think we are as a board. And one of the nice things about the colleagues that I work with is that everyone embraces getting up to speed on new topics and learning more about how we can make things better in the decisions that we make. So
Hey, you raised a good point about accountability. And there's no question that the state of Vermont has changed their philosophies of how they want to rehabilitate or they want to get away from the word punishment, which we understand that. And we've seen some great information coming out from the state of Maine, the women's facility that they have up there. And I think that we've all been kind of re-energized or even re-educated about what punishment can be or not. Yeah. And I think we're pretty excited about what the possibilities we could do with this women's facility. Do you feel that with all these changes and everything that you can always you have what you need to adequately protect the public? You have the final say as if you're not.
We do. And I think, part of our training has taught us, as I think I mentioned this early on, is beginning in the process, we would go with our gut feelings and be overprotective and not granting parole. And through some of these fantastic training programs that we've attended over the years, we've now focused on going forward as opposed to looking into the past, what happened, and making decisions based on the risks going forward. And what's the plan going forward? How can we change the direction of this person's life so they're no longer involved in the criminal justice system. How can they get away from that? Obviously, not all of them are going to work the first time. We get that. And obviously, by having 150 violation hearings a year, we're going to see a lot of these people back again. But when we see them back again, is it because they have a substance abuse issue that isn't being resolved at this point, or they're in the process of resolving it? It takes time. People are going to relapse. We know that. Are we still okay with them being in the community? Is it safe for them to be in the community? If it's not, what can we do to change things? Those kinds of things. So we're spending a lot more of our time and effort focusing on that than rehashing the original offense from when they were convicted and sent through the criminal justice system.
Mr. George, thank you so much for your service, and your background is wonderful for this. And one of your colleagues also talked about how the board is focusing on the future of the individual, not their past.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about restorative justice, and it all sounds really positive. So do you have any advice for us as legislators? Because we've identified, and we are working on all these things, but the judiciary has lack of capacity, housing for people when they get out, substance abuse. I mean, it's kind of hard to prioritize those, but we are working on all of them.
I know.
Do you have any advice?
Well, one of the things that we have been able to do, and I appreciate that, is both our director, Mary Jane Ainsworth, and myself have had opportunities to testify before committees a number of times. And we're very fortunate to have Mary Jane Ainsworth as our director. And she puts a lot of effort into how we can facilitate some of the things that we would like to do. And if it's a matter of meeting the challenge of housing, how do we do that? And there are lots of things that with the right tools make it a lot easier. But I think we have the tools now. And when we have issues that come up, I think one of the things that we're working on now, for example, is we have our legal counsel comes from the Attorney General's office. And our legal counsel, who provides us with help when we need it from challenges, is also overseeing the legal representation for the Department of Corrections. And she has said throughout the year that the board really needs to have someone who is independent from the Department of Corrections representing them. She does a great job of providing us advice, and the Attorney General's office supports us in some of the challenges come up. But there are things that she can't do because she also oversees the attorneys for the Department of Corrections. So at some point, there has to be a way to find a representative of the Attorney General's office that can represent the board. None of us are attorneys in these kinds of litigations that wouldn't challenge the sort of the conflict of interest with the Department of Corrections. That's one small thing.
All right, that's interesting.
It's important. Yeah, and she's brought it to our attention a number of times since she started representing us. And her name is Lori Fisher, and she does a great job for us. We're really happy to have her available for us. Typically, when we have a staff meeting, which is the last week of the month, we spend time at each staff meeting getting updates from her as our attorney representing us. We get updates from the victim services people. We get updates from the restitution unit and any other topics that happen to come along. But it's her advice for us that's been really helpful this year.
Great, thank you.
Do you have any the success story that stays with you? That when you say, hey, that worked, you have one of those? Or many? Sure, many.
We do somewhere between 75 and 100 early releases a year. And so these are people that still have time left on their sentence. But they've been doing such a good job while on parole that they're being considered for early discharge. So it's, I can't think of one right off the top of my head today, but to have them come in before the board, bring their families with them, and tell us about their successes over the last few years and how things have changed their lives. And then for us to be able to grant them discharge from parole that day, that minute, so they walk out the door with nothing hanging over their heads moving forward. Those are fantastic.
That's a good feeling.
Committee, anything else?
No, we're lucky to have you.
Yeah,
Thank
Chair,
you.
I think, yeah.
Don't quit.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have you, and I think it's overstated sometimes, but sometimes not stated enough. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
For what you do. Thank you for taking it very serious and doing the job that you do. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time as well.
I think you can probably tell we're probably going to be unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good to see you,
Thank you.
Brian.
Take care, Dean. So I'll move that we vote to confirm the reappointment of Dean George as chair of the Vermont Parole Board.
Thank you. Want to call the roll?
Okay.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Matthews.
Yes.
Senator Renner, yes. Senator Ingles.
Absolutely.
They were all really good.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of work over the years, especially when they had to travel.
Yeah, that was-
Places that they spent hours.
Yeah, sounds like.
Go to Springfield, St. Albans, spend travel
Yeah, I think
all
we
day
can-
to get there.